Welcome to part 5 of this Blender tutorial series where we're creating this cute robot character. If you haven't seen the previous parts, you can check out the tutorial playlist linked in the video description. So in this part, we're going to be doing all of the rigging for the robot. Now before we start this part, I wanted to let you know about a really great Blender add-on called Cut and Wrap, which is a great add-on for cutting out transparent images and adding decals. Cut and Wrap is a great Blender add-on for cutting out transparent images and adding decals. The cutout option is great for cutting out things like decals, icons, nature, and leaves. You can generate a cutout from a single image or bulk cut out multiple images at once. You can also control the subdivisions of your cutouts. The add-on can also automatically separate the islands and break up each part of the image into their own objects, speeding up your workflow. The add-on also has a really great shrink wrap option for adding decals. Simply select a part of the object from the shrink wrap settings and generate the cutout. You can then use the slide cutout option to move the decal on the surface of your object. You can find my full add-on review video with the link in the description, and if you purchase the add-on through my affiliate link, you'll be helping to support this channel. Alright, now something that I actually want to do, which I didn't do in the previous part, is I actually want these two objects to be the same object because they're actually going to rotate together. Now I could just select this object and then shift select the other object and then parent it so that then when I rotate the wrist, it's going to rotate the palm. But just to make it a little bit simpler and easier, I'm just going to join them together. So if we go to the modifiers, you can see they both have the same modifiers. So I'm just going to select the palm and then shift select the wrist and then Control J. So now they're one object, so they're just all the wrist. So now let's go over here to the other side, and I'm going to select this palm and then shift select the wrist and hit Control J. So now you can see if I rotate this, that's how the wrist is going to rotate if I rotate it on the x-axis. Now right up here in the outliner, we don't need the references anymore, so I'm just going to click on this check there just to uncheck the references, and then because we're doing the rigging in this part, I'm just going to click on the lights and camera just to disable that. So I'm now going to select all the objects at once, and I'm just going to hit Control A, and I want to apply the rotation and scale just to make sure this is the default rotation and scale of all the objects. So what I now want to do is place the origin points where it's going to rotate. For example, if I select this object, if I try to rotate it, it's going to rotate on default where the object origin is, but I don't want it to rotate in the center of the robot. I want it to rotate right here where that ball and socket joint is. So let's just go over here to this side, and we're going to do this side first. So what I want to do is first set the rotation point for where the claws are. So I'm going to select this object and we'll go into edit mode, and I'm just going to select this face and then shift select this face. So both of those faces are selected, and I'm going to hit Shift S. And I'm going to move my mouse down to cursor to select it and let go. So the 3D cursor is in the very center there of our selection. And that's where I want the claws to rotate. So I'm going to go back to object mode, and then I'm going to hold down the shift key and select both claws. And I'm going to click on object, set origin, and we're going to set the origin to the 3D cursor. So now if I select the claw and rotate it, you can see it's rotating correctly. Now I'm going to be using the origin to 3D cursor a lot in this video. So if I press the Q button, you can see I've added the origin to 3D cursor to my quick favorites because I use it so much. So if you want to add to your quick favorites, you can just click on object, set origin to 3D cursor, and you can right click, and then you can click on add to quick favorites. You can see here it says remove to quick favorites. That's because I've already added it to my quick favorites. And then if you want to save that as your default preferences in Blender, so the quick favorites is already there, you'll just need to open up the preferences. So edit, preferences, and then you'll just need to click on the save preferences button. So if you save the preferences, that's going to save your quick favorites. So now that I've added to my quick favorites, I can just click on Q and type origin to 3D cursor. If you don't want to add it to your quick favorites, you can just click on object, set origin, and then origin to 3D cursor. All right, so I've just set that up so that can rotate. However, I don't want to be able to rotate it on these other axes. I just want to be able to rotate it on the Y axis. So we're going to lock the transforms. So first, let's just go over here and do it to the other side. So I'm going to select this object, and we'll go into edit mode, and I'm going to select this face and then shift select this face, and then I'll hit Shift S, move my mouse down, and then let go. So now the 3D cursor is in the center there of where the rotation is going to be. So now I'm going to select both claws at once, and I'm going to hit Q and origin to 3D cursor. So now what I'm going to do is select all the claws. So we have all the claws selected, and I want to lock the rotation so they can only rotate on the Y axis. So I'm going to hit the N key to open up the side panel, and I'm going to go here to item, and we can actually lock the transforms. So to lock all the transforms for all the objects at once, for all the objects which are selected, you can hold down the Alt key and then click and drag to lock all the transforms, and that's going to lock it for all of them. But then I just want to unlock the rotation Y. So hold down the Alt key and click there on the rotation Y. So now you can see if I click on all of them, you can see all of them are locked except the Y rotation. So now if I try to rotate this, you can see I can't rotate it on the X and Z, but only the Y axis. All right, so those are finished. So now let's go to the next object, which is the wrist. So for the wrist, I want to go into edit mode, and I just want to select that face right back there, and I'll hit Shift S, cursor to selected. We can go back to object mode, and then I'm going to hit Q and origin to 3D cursor. So now I can rotate this, and I just want to lock this on the X axis. So I'm going to lock all of the rotations except the rotation X. So just unlock that. And now you can see the wrist can rotate. So we'll do the same thing for the other side. So we're going to select the wrist. We'll go into edit mode, and I'm going to select this back face. We'll hit Shift S, cursor to selected. We'll go back to object mode, and I'll hit Q. And we can do origin to 3D cursor. Then I'm going to lock all of the rotations and locations and scale except the X rotation. So now the wrist can just rotate like that. Let's select the next object and we'll go into edit mode, and I'm going to deselect everything and then hit the L key with my mouse hovered over the rotation point, so the ball and socket joint, and I'll hit Shift S, cursor to selected. We'll go back to object mode, and I'll hit Q and then origin to 3D cursor. So now if I double tap R, double tapping R will use the trackball rotation. I can just kind of rotate that piece around. So I'm now going to lock the locations and the rotations, actually lock the locations and the scale, but we're not going to lock any of the rotations because I want this to be a ball and socket joint. So we'll select this object, we'll go into edit mode, just select this entire piece, Shift S, move my mouse down, we'll go back to object mode, and I'll hit Q, and then origin to 3D cursor, and then I'm going to lock the locations and the scales, so now we can just rotate that. So the process is pretty much the same for most of these objects. So we'll do the same thing for this object. So edit mode, L, Shift S, object mode, Q, origin to 3D cursor, we'll lock the locations and the scale, edit mode, L, Shift S, and then object mode, Q, origin to 3D cursor, lock the locations and the scale. So now I can rotate that and I can rotate that. Now for the shoulders, we're not going to be moving the shoulders at all. So I'm going to select the shoulders and just lock the locations, rotations, and scale. So now I can't move the shoulders. So that's basically the entire arm rigging, but we need to now parent the objects to the other objects, because when I rotate the arm, I want it to rotate the other objects. So we're going to first select the claws, and then lastly shift select the wrist. We'll hit Control P to parent, and we're going to set parent to object. So now if I rotate the wrist, you can see the wrist is going to rotate, but then on their local transforms, each one of the claws can also rotate. So this is a really cool mechanical rigging setup. But then if I select all these objects, I can hit Alt-R, and Alt-R is going to clear the rotation values, so it's back to its default pose. So I'm now going to select the wrist, and then shift select the lower arm, Control P, set parent to object, then select the lower arm and shift select the upper arm, Control P, set parent to object, and then the upper arm can be parented to the shoulders, Control P, set parent to object. So now I can rotate the upper arm, the lower arm, and then also the wrist, and then also the claws, and they all rotate correctly. But then if I just shift select all the objects, I can hit Alt-R to clear the rotations. So we can bring the character back to his default pose, so this like T pose when we're animating the character. So we're going to do the same thing for this side. So we'll select the claws, and lastly select the wrist, Control P to object, wrist to upper arm or lower arm, Control P to object, lower arm to upper arm, Control P, set parent to object, and then upper arm to the shoulder, Control P, set parent to object. And then we'll just make sure it works. So that's going to work. That works fine, and that works. So then if we select the objects, Alt-R to clear the rotation. So that is it for the arm rigging. So now what we want to do is we want to parent the shoulders to the body, and we also want to parent these other objects. So I'm going to hold down the shift key, and we're going to select the little pieces there. We're also going to select like those buttons there. We're also going to select this panel, so the front panel. So basically all of those objects show the shoulders and the details. And then lastly, we're going to select the body, Control P to object. And then if we just select these objects here, so the shoulders and also the buttons and the panels and the front panel here, I want to lock all the transforms for all of these objects at once. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key and click and drag just to lock all of the transforms. So now I can't move them around and I can't scale them or anything. So now I want the body to rotate on the X-axis, but I want the body to rotate where the axle is. So if I select the axle, you can see the origin point is in the center of where the axle is. So I'll hit Shift S, cursor to selected, and then if I select the body, I can hit Q, and I'm going to do origin to 3D cursor. So now if I try to rotate this, you can see it can rotate where the axle is. So it basically is rotating around the wheels. So then I want to lock everything except the X rotation. So I'm going to lock everything by clicking down and dragging, but we're going to unlock the X rotation. So now the body can rotate back and forth. So we're now going to rig the neck and the head. So what I'm first going to do is select the antenna and the ears and the eyes and the mouth and the screen. And then lastly, select the head, Control P, set parent to object. And then we're just going to select the head and then Shift select the neck, Control P, set parent to object. Then we're going to select the neck and Shift select the body last and Control P, set parent to object. And then I want to create like a little kind of controller piece so that I can rotate the neck. So I'm going to go into edit mode of the neck. I'm going to go to the vertex select and I'm just going to select the loop of vertices there and I'll duplicate it and then scale it up. And we're just going to scale it up and just stick it right about there. So now you can see we have this really easy piece that I can just easily select. So it's just a part of the neck object, but instead of trying to select the neck object, which is kind of small, we can just click right out here and then we can rotate this. So now what I want to do is I want to lock all the transforms for all the head pieces. So we're going to hold down the Shift key and select all of these head pieces like that. And we're going to hold down the Alt key and lock all of those. So we can't rotate them or move them and scale them. And then as far as the neck goes, I only want to be able to rotate the neck on the Z axis. So with the neck selected, we're going to lock everything except the Z rotation. Let's hit Control S to save the project. And then if we rotate this, you can see that's already rotated or parented. So I can rotate the body, then I can rotate the head or rotate the neck and it's going to rotate the head around. But then if I select everything, I can hit Alt R to clear the rotations. So I now want to rig the wheels. So I'm going to select the axle and I'm going to go into edit mode and I'm going to go to the vertex select and I'm just going to select one of these loops of vertices. And again, just like we did for the neck, I want to create like a controller object. So I'll hit Shift D and then S. We're going to scale this up and then bring it out here. We can go to front view and I'm just going to stick it maybe about there. So now we just have this object which I can really quickly just grab. So instead of trying to like select this wheel and rotate it, I can just like select this piece and that's going to be our controller piece. So now what I want to do is parent the tire and also the treads to the actual axle. So we're going to select both of these objects and then lastly just select the axle, Control P, set parent to object. So now I want to lock all the transforms of these three objects. So hold down the Alt key and lock all of them, but we just want to be able to rotate it on the X axis. So hold down Alt and then click on the X rotation. So now I can just rotate all of these. So if I click on it, I can only rotate this on the X axis. Now actually, if I select the tire here, I actually do want to lock this. And then if I select the treads, I also want to lock this on the X rotation because I only want to be able to rotate the axle. So the axle is going to rotate all of the wheels. So now if I select everything and hit Alt R, Alt G or Alt S, that's going to clear the rotation, location, and scale. And you can see the robot is in his default pose. So now what I want to do is add one more controller piece, which is going to control the entire robot. So I'm going to center the 3D cursor and I'll go to the add menu and I'm going to add a cube and I'll go to front view. And I'm going to go into edit mode. And what I first want to do in edit mode is bring the cube up on the Z axis and bring it all the way up so that the origin point is on the very bottom, just like that. So I want the origin to be on the bottom so I can like rotate the robot and it'll rotate from the bottom. So I'm now going to go back to object mode and I'm going to bring it down on the Z axis and bring down the object on the Z axis right there. So now the origin point and the bottom of the cube is right there on the bottom of the wheel. So this way, if I just go into wireframe, if I just rotate this object, you can see it's going to rotate by the object's origin. So you can sort of think of this as like maybe a motorcycle or a bicycle. When someone is riding on a bike or a motorcycle, as they like rotate to the side or kind of curve around a bend, they're going to rotate over as they are rotating around the bend. So let's go into edit mode and I'm going to box select the top and we'll bring the top up on the Z axis and then select everything and maybe just bring it out a little bit. Then let's go to side view and I'm going to scale everything down on the Y just like that. So I can now go back to object mode and that's going to be our controller piece. But I want to go into edit mode and I want to hit X to delete everything, and we're going to delete only faces. So this way we now basically just have a wireframe. So back in object mode, you can see I have basically a wireframe cube where I can just select this and then move everything. So now what we want to do is just parent the objects. So what we need to do is just select the body and then shift select the cube, Control P, and set parent to object. So now if I move this around, everything moves with it. However, we do have one problem, and that is that we need to also parent the wheels to the body, or the wheels to the main controller. I don't actually want to parent the wheels to the body because I might actually want to be able to rotate the body without actually moving the wheels. So I want to be able to rotate the body back and forth without the wheels rotating. So we're going to select the axle and then shift select the cube blast. Control P, set parent to object. So now if I move this around, everything's going to move with it. Now, if I hit Alt G and Alt R and Alt S, you can see it's going to move the robot up. And why it's moving the robot up and not being in the very center is because the cube's origin point is in the bottom. So when you hit Alt G to clear the locations, it's going to move it up to the top. So it's going to bump it up to the top, but that's totally fine. And now as the robot is kind of rotating around a bend, we can kind of animate him moving back and forth. And then let's rename this object. So I'll hit F2 to rename this, and I'm going to rename it to Robot Controller. And I'm just going to open up the outliner here and open up the robot controller. And then let's just open up these objects and just make sure everything is renamed. If I just open this up, it looks like all the objects are renamed. So I'm just going to minimize these objects. And I'll hit the N key to close the side panel. Now we're not done with the rigging yet, because what I want to do is make it so that when I move the robot forward and backwards, it's actually going to rotate the wheels automatically. So first we're going to be adding an object constraint to make it so the wheels rotate when the robot moves forward. So I'm going to select the axle here, and then let's go over here to the object constraints. Now I recently posted a tutorial on how to use object constraints for beginners. If you're interested in checking that out, link is in the video description. And in that tutorial, I cover all the main object constraints that beginners need to know. So it's a pretty cool video. If you want to check it out, link is in the description. So what I'm going to do is add object constraint to the axle, and I'm going to add the transformation. So with the transformation, we have a map from and a map to. So we're basically going to say that when the cube here, when the robot controller moves on its local y-axis, so when it moves forward, that is in turn going to make the axle rotate around on the x-axis. So for the transformation target, we want to click on the eyedropper, and we're going to choose the robot controller. Then we're going to turn on the extrapolate button, and the extrapolate button is basically going to make it loop, so it's going to continue to rotate again and again. Now here on the target and the owner, we want to change these both to local space. And why I'm changing them both to local space is because let's say we're animating the robot, and maybe the robot is looking in this direction, or the robot is like going down a hill or up a hill or something like that. I don't want to be able to just have it rotate on the world space, but I want it to be able to rotate on the local space. So if the object or if the robot is moving back and forth this direction, I still want the tire to rotate forward. So that is why we are using the local space for both the target and the owner. So now from the map from, we want to use location, because the map from is what is the cube going to do? So what is the robot going to do? So we're going to keep it at location. And what I'm going to do is use the Y, because I want to move this back and forth on the Y. So click back on the axle. We want to use the Y here, and the minimum is going to be 0. And on the maximum, I find that turning this to a negative 1.2 is pretty good. So negative 1.2. And why I'm changing it to negative is so that the tire rotates in the right direction. So basically we're saying that every time the robot moves by negative 1.2 on the Y, that is going to in turn make the axle rotate. So we're going to have it rotate, and we're going to have it rotate on the x-axis. So here on the x source axis, the maximum value, I'm going to turn this to 180. And then what I'm going to do is also change this little drop down here. We need to change this drop down to whichever one we're using right up here. So because this is going to move on the y-axis, we want to change this to y. And also, if you want to do this just to make things more easy to remember, you can change all of these to y. So change the z source axis, the y source axis, and the x source axis all to y, so you can see it's going to gray out those values. So that's an easy way that you can remember, because I remember when I was first learning this, I found it pretty confusing and hard to remember. So you can just turn them all to y, and so that kind of reminds you that it's graying out the z and the x. So it's reminding you that we're only going to use the Y. So now when I select the robot controller and move it on the Y axis, you can see it's going to move the wheel. Now, if the wheel looks like it's kind of sliding, maybe it's moving too fast or too slow, then you can change the rotation. So if I just select the axle again, you could, for example, turn this up to like a -2, and now when I select the wheel and move it, you can see the wheel's going to move a bit slower. So you can kind of just see how that looks. Or if I select the axle again and change it to like a -1, or let's change it to a -0.5. Now if I select the cube and move it back and forth, you can see it kind of looks like it's sliding, so it's kind of moving way too fast. So for me, if I just select the axle again, I believe changing it to around a 0.1 is pretty good. Now, technically there are ways to like find the circumference or the height of the cylinder and then do some math and then figure out an exact value, which is more technically accurate. But in this case, I am just going to kind of slide it around here and just get something that looks good. So I think that just changing the map from location value to a -1.2 is pretty good. So -1.2. And then because we use the local values instead of the global values, you can see right here I changed it to local space. This way, if the robot is looking in a different direction, you can see even if I move it back and forth like in this direction, the tires are still going to move because we're not using the global space. The global space would make it only move back and forth in this direction, but we're using the local space of just this cube. So for example, if I hit G to grab and then double tap Y, it's going to use the local axis. So that's going to make the wheels always rotate forward when it's moving forward. So I'll hit Alt R to clear the rotations. So that is it for the wheel rigging. So now let's do the shape keys. We're going to be adding shape keys, and then we can animate the shape keys to create the different expressions for the robot. So the first thing that we need to do is apply the mirror modifiers, because for example, if I just select like the eye here and move the eye forward or move it to the side, let's say I want the robot to look over on this side, it's just going to mess it up and it's going to look like he's like cross-eyeing. So we want both of the pupils to move over to one side. So let's go to the modifiers, let's click on the drop down and apply the mirror, and then we want to click on the face here or click on the mouth, click on the drop down and apply the mirror. So we're now going to go into edit mode and we're going to go into wireframe. We're going to deselect everything and I'm going to hit C for the circle select and just click and drag, and then click and drag around here and hit escape. All right, let's go back to solid view. So we're just going to select those pupils. So instead of having it be its default pose, we're actually going to scale the pupils down and move it over here into like the left corner. So like the bottom left corner. And that way we can add the shape keys and we can add it back into the center. So what we're going to do is go to side view. We'll go to wireframe and we're going to hit G and we're just going to drag this right down here and stick it way down there. All right, let's go to front view and we're also going to move it over here on the side, so in the corner. Then what we're also going to do is we're going to click on the transform pivot point and we're going to change it to individual origins, and then we'll scale all of this down so it's really small and bring it down and bring it over here to the side. Let's also go back to side view and just make sure we bring that forward a little bit, maybe rotate it just slightly. All right, so let's go back to solid view. So we're basically making the most extreme values and then we'll dial it back later. So let's go back to object mode and I'm going to click here on the object data properties and we're going to open up shape keys. Now the last thing that I want to do before I add the shape keys is I want to move the entire eyes up and down. So I'm going to go to front view, actually side view, and we'll go into wireframe and I'm going to move it down. We're just going to stick it right about there. Then if I go to front view, let's drag it over here to the very corner bottom of the screen. So basically just like that. So we're kind of making the extreme values, the most extreme values, and then we'll be able to dial it back. So we're now going to click here on the object data properties, and we're going to open up the shape keys. And we're going to click on the plus here to add a new shape key, and we're just going to leave this at basis. So now we're going to click on the plus here to add a new shape key, and this shape key is going to be controlling the pupil size. So I'm going to rename this to pupil size. So we'll now go into edit mode, and what I want to do is select all of the pieces here which are selecting the pupil. So just select all the pupil. So we're just going to alt select that loop, and then let's zoom in really close and shift alt select that loop, that loop, that loop, and that loop. And then we're going to do the same thing for the other side. So select that loop, and that loop, and that loop. So if I just scale this up and scale it down, you can see because we have the rotation point here to individual origins, or the transform pivot point to individual origins, we're going to be able to scale the pupils. So now what we're going to do is go to front view and make sure you have the pupil size selected here in the shape keys. And we're just going to scale this up pretty big. So just make it pretty big like that. So now if we go back into object mode, you can see it's going to jump back to its original position. And so now we have this value, which we can turn up and down to change the pupil size. And then there's also the basis, but the basis is just like the very base one. So there's nothing that we can animate, but we can animate the pupil size. So now let's click on the plus here to add a new shape key. And this one, I'm going to rename this to pupil up / down. So I'm going to go into edit mode and let's go to front view and I'm going to bring it up on the Z axis and bring it up right here. Then let's go to side view and I want to drag it back just like that. All right, so then I'll hit tab to go back to object mode. So now I can drag this value on the pupil up and down, and you can see we can move it up into this corner or move it down. And actually I'm going to go back into edit mode real quick and maybe drag it forward a little bit. So drag it forward on the y-axis a little bit more forward. All right, so now we have this value up and down, but then as well as dragging the pupil up and down, we can also click on the pupil size and we can make the pupil size bigger. So let's turn these values back to 0. So we'll be able to animate these values in the next part to animate the expression. So let's click on the plus here to add a new shape key. And this one I'm going to rename to pupil left and right. So I'll go into edit mode with this one selected, and I'm going to move it over here to this side and then go back to object mode. So now we can animate this one kind of moving around back and forth. So then what I also want to do is move the entire eyes up and down. So we'll click on the plus to add a new shape key. This one I'm going to rename to eyes up and down. So we'll go into edit mode, we'll go to front view, we'll bring it up on the Z axis, and then we'll go to side view and just bring it back so it just goes there into the screen. All right, so we can go back to object mode. So now we can change this value to animate the eyes moving. Let's click on the plus here to create one more. And this shape key I'm going to call eyes left / right. So I'll go into edit mode and I'll just bring it over here to the other side and then go back to object mode. So now we can change all the values. So we want to change most of the values to around 0.4 or 0.5 so it's in the center. So we'll change that there. Now let's click on the eyes up and down and we're going to drag this up to bring it back to the center. Then we'll click on the pupil left and right and we'll drag this to about the center, which is going to be about 0.5. Then we're going to change the pupil up and down and again change this to about 0.4 or 0.5 so it's in the center. And then we'll click on the pupil size and change this about halfway or maybe a little bit smaller, maybe just like a 0.2 or a 0.25. So now you can see that the robot is back to his default position, but we can animate all these values. So we could make him like surprised or make him maybe like scared. We could also maybe have him looking up and down. So we can use this to animate the robot's expression. So now we're going to do pretty much the same thing for the mouth. So we're going to select the mouth and we're going to go into edit mode and let's first make the basis. So the basis key. So we're going to go to side view. We'll go to wireframe and we're just going to drag this way down to the very bottom and place it there. All right, and maybe bring it back a little bit. So something like that. So we're now going to click on the plus here to add a new shape key. So that's the basis. Then we're going to add a new shape key. And this key we're going to rename to mouth up and down. So in edit mode, we're going to go to side view. We'll go to wireframe and I'm just going to drag this way up here to the very top. So if I go back to object mode, we can now change this value. So you can see I can just animate the mouth moving up and down. So let's click on the plus here to add a new shape key. And this one I'm going to rename to mouth smile open. So I'll go to front view, I'll go into edit mode, and I'll go to wireframe. And I'm just going to box select these vertices and bring it up like that. Box select these vertices and bring it up like that. And maybe rotate this and maybe rotate this and bring it up. So now that we have all these at basically the top, I'm going to select all of them and I'll scale them on the Z axis and I'll type 0 and enter. Just like that. So now you can see we have a cute open mouth. And then what I'm going to do is select that loop of vertices and we're going to double tap G to edge slide and stick it there in the corner. Select that loop of vertices and just edge slide it into the corner. All right, so now we have the mouth smiling and opening. So now we can just animate this and we can have him opening his mouth. So that's very cute. Let's add a new shape key. We're going to rename this shape key to mouth sad. And so now we're going to go into edit mode. We're going to select everything and we're going to scale it on the Z axis by -1. So -1, so now he is sad. And then also we need to rotate this. So let's rotate it on the X axis, rotate it over so it's kind of aligning with the screen. So if I go back to object mode, we can now just animate this and we can make him have a sad face. And I could rename this maybe to sad mouth. Well, let's click on the plus to add a new shape key. And this shape key I'm going to rename to mouth straight. So we'll go to front view, we'll go into edit mode, we'll go into wireframe, and I just need to deselect everything. And then manually, I'm just going to select each one of these loops and kind of move it down and rotate it. So just select each one of these loops. We're just going to make the mouth straight. So just like that. Then we'll do the same thing for this side. So kind of rotate this over, rotate this over. All right, like that. Rotate this back. And then you can see it's kind of wobbly. So what I'm going to do is box select these vertices here and scale it on the z-axis by 0. Then we're going to box select the bottom vertices and scale it on the z-axis by 0. All right, just like that. And then if we select everything, we want to rotate everything on the x-axis so it's kind of angled. So now if I go back to object mode, we can animate the mouth coming more straight. So now what I want to do is animate the mouth moving to the left and to the right. So let's add a new shape key. This I'm going to rename mouth left. So we'll go into edit mode and we're going to rotate it and move it over and just stick it kind of right here. So I can add kind of a cute kind of quirky expression. All right, like that. And also if you wanted to, you could add a new object and put it on the top, and you could animate shape keys as well and create like some eyebrows. That would be something cool if you want to do that in your own time to make some eyebrows. So let's go back to object mode. So now I can animate this value. And so you can see he kind of has a cute quirky smile. He kind of moves his mouth over to the side. But then we could, for example, also animate the mouth opening. So now he looks like he's going, yay! Let's add one more. So I'm going to click on the plus here to add a new shape key. We're going to call this mouth right. We'll go into edit mode and we'll rotate it and move it over here to this side like that. So now we also have a mouth right. So now we have a lot of different shape keys, so we can really add a lot of expression. So now I'm going to click here on the mouth up and down and drag this to around maybe 0.3 or 0.4, just like that, so the mouth is in the center. And we can go into the rendered view and see how this is looking. So now we can just kind of play around with this and we can create some really cool expressions. So I'll press Ctrl S to save the project. And so the rigging is completed for the robot. So if you wanted to, you could create kind of a cool pose, maybe make the robot waving, add a cute expression, and then you could just like add a camera and do a final render. But this is going to wrap it up for this part. So in the very last part, we are going to be animating the robot. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you're enjoying the tutorial series. And when the final part is released, I'm going to have it linked right up there on the end screen. And also the link will be in the video description. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in the final part.